guys, so I have been seeing the Fiber Arts tag going around YouTube, and so I decided that it was time for me to go ahead and sit down and record it myself. Looks like it's a series of about 21 questions, and yeah, let's go ahead and get into them. Question number 1. Who are you? Well, that's a deep question. So if you are new to my podcast or my channel, my name is Christy. I live in the Denver area of Colorado. I've been here for about a year and a half. I was born and raised in Southern California, and that is where I lived almost entirely until a year and a half ago. I did spend, I don't know, about 4 months living in Alaska when I was 20. But other than that, it's been in the Inland Empire of Southern California. And I am 40 years old. I'm married to Ron. I've been married to Ron for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years in September. We have 2 daughters, Tatum, who is 13, and Delaney, who is 10. And then we have our cat, Lilu, who is a tuxedo cat, who is still fairly new to our family. We got her in August. Yeah, I guess that's it. I'm Christy Layel, Christy-Layel on Ravelry, and I'm Christy Layel without the dash on Instagram. I'm also Christy Layel without the dash on Goodreads if you are a reader. Question number 2. When and why did you start knitting / crocheting / spinning / weaving? A lot of these questions are open for other fiber arts, but I will tell you that I am only a knitter, so I'm going to basically answer all these questions as they pertain to my knitting. So I started knitting maybe a dozen years ago. Tatum was about a year and a half old, and I was still a fairly new stay-at-home mom, and I come from a very crafty family. My mom quilts, and she also knows how to crochet, and my aunt is an amazing seamstress, and can basically make anything. My uncle is the same way. My mom is the same way too. The 3 of them, they're siblings, and they are just, if you need something done, they're the ones to go to. It's great at Christmas because when they come and visit, they make things happen at my house, which I like. So because I grew up in this family, we always did some kind of crafts. That was just a thing that we did. I did those woven dishcloths like everybody who grew up in the 80s did, and I remember when I was early in my teen years, my mom taught me how to cross stitch, and so that was my main form of craft. But I also really liked, art. I loved to draw and that kind of thing. And so going back to the cross stitch, that was counted cross stitch. That was my main source of craft, and I really took to it when I was pregnant with Tatum. Although I was not a cross stitcher as I am a knitter. Like, there was no capital C in that, like there is a capital K. Several months went by when I wouldn't pick up the cross stitching at all, whereas now there's not even a day that goes by that I don't pick up my knitting. But I remember, when she was, when I was pregnant with her, and then when she was born, I tried to work on cross stitch, and I liked making the things. But you got to remember, this was back in 2004, and there wasn't as many options to get cross-stitching stuff. Like, you went to Joann's or Michael's and you got a cross-stitch kit. I'm sure there may have been 1 or 2 online retailers, but back then you didn't buy a lot of things online yet. eBay was just getting started, and so the idea of putting your credit card online, it's just, yeah. Anyway, so I would go to Joann's and I would find these cross-stitching kits, and I would work on them, and I liked them. But what I found with an infant, especially as Tatum got to be mobile, it was too difficult. You have to kind of have a block of time, a block of uninterrupted time where you can work on your cross-stitching, and and it wasn't very mobile. So at home, Tatum would interrupt me a lot, and I was worried about losing a needle or something like that and then having her find it. And then I couldn't really take it when we went places because it's not a very social craft. I don't think it's as social as, say, knitting or crocheting. So, so I was looking, I was kind of, half-heartedly looking, maybe not even looking, I would think I was just unhappy, unfulfilled with the cross-stitching. And one of the seniors at my church came up to me. She knew that I liked to cross-stitch, she knew that I liked crafts, and she knew that I had a lot of time on my hands being, a stay-at-home mom. And so she asked if I wanted to take a class that she was giving on beginning knitting at the senior center. Obviously, I wasn't a senior, but she was teaching the class, and it was $5, and that included needles and yarn and a pattern. And so I was, how could I say no to $5? I was very poor at the time. We had just come on to one single income, and Ron's income at that point was not very, really wasn't for a full family to live off of. So anyway, I took the class with her. She taught me how to knit and to purl, how to cast on and bind off, and that was basically it. The pattern that she gave to us was a very simple hat knit flat and then seamed up the side, and it was a ribbed hat, 2x2 ribbing. And I learned how to do like those skinny garter stitch scarves that were very in vogue at that point, in the mid-aughts. And so, yeah, that's what I did. The needles that I had were these huge straight aluminum needles. They were like 8 feet long, and I think they were like a size 9. And Red Heart, Super Saver, Aran, worsted, something like that. So I did that a little bit, and I liked it that it was more something that I could pick up and put down a little bit easier, although I'd still had to count knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 for a long time, and I had, like, I couldn't stop in the middle of a row. Nobody could talk to me while I was in a row, because if I lost my count, I had to, go all the way back to the beginning of the row and count. I did not know how to read my knitting at all. So anyway, I did that for a little bit, but I was like, well, I don't really want to I don't wear scarves. I've never liked to wear scarves. And, you can only have so many hats. So, I guess this isn't the full craft for me. But a friend of mine for Christmas, that Christmas after I started, knitting, she gave me this box of, it was like I don't know, knitting in a box. I don't remember what it was called, but she probably got it like Borders or Barnes & Noble. And it included several patterns on these little cards and a skein of wool and circular needles. It was the first time I'd ever seen circular needles. They were bamboo. They were probably like Boyle or Susan Bates type needles. But yeah, I was looking through these patterns, and there was so many cute things. There was the scarves, and there were the hats, but there were fingerless gloves, and that's what got me, was the fingerless gloves. I thought those were the most amazing things ever. If I can find the pattern, I'll put it here. I don't even remember what it was called, but I loved them, and so I decided I was going to knit them. And so I got my yarn, which was Red Heart Super Saver, and I got my needles, which was, the straight aluminums, and I didn't use the yarn that came in the kit because it was a baby pale pink, and that is like my least favorite pink. And so what I had was, like bright yellow or something like that, much more a Christy color. And so I sat down with my yarn and my needles, and I looked at the pattern, and it said complete gibberish. I had no idea what the pattern said. I couldn't read it. It was a different language. C/O 46 STS K, 1 P1. What is that? Because the pattern that I had for the hat, it wrote it all out. Knit 1, or knit 2, purl 2. And so I was lost. I'm like, I can't do this. I don't actually know how to do this. So there was a yarn shop that wasn't too far away from my house, about a mile, and I was walking a lot with Tatum during the afternoons. And so I walked down there, and I brought the pattern with me and my needles and my yarn, and I said, "Can you teach me how to read this?" And at this point, like, I was thinking that knitting was going to be this like cheap craft that I could do, and I could get all my supplies at Michael's or Joann's and not spend a lot of money. I was blown away when I walked into the yarn shop because it was real yarn, and the prices were real, and I was like, oh my gosh, how could somebody spend $25 on a skein of sock yarn? I didn't know what sock yarn yet was, but she had hanks. I'd never seen a hank before, because I was always getting them in the pre-made balls that come from, Michael's and Joann's. And she had these hanks of Cherry Tree Hill and Claudia hand-painted, and they were loose. She'd unraveled them and would just hang them from the wall, and they were beautiful. But I would look at them, and they were $25 and $30 a skein, a hank, for worsted weight yarn. And again, at the time, I didn't know what worsted weight yarn was, but I was just blown away by how expensive this yarn was. I was like, I'm never going to be able to buy anything here, but at least maybe I can, find out how to at least read the pattern. So she gave lessons. Her name was Sandra. She wasn't actually the owner. She was the, I don't know, the clerk, the knitting guru that was there all the time, and she gave lessons. It was like $25 for a lesson, and she said that she would get me through the pattern. So she's looking at the fingerless gloves, and she's like, "Yeah, I can teach you. This is a very simple pattern, easy. What yarn are you using?" And so I showed her my Red Heart Super Saver. And she goes, that's the wrong weight of yarn. And I said, weight of yarn? And she said, yes, that's a worsted weight. What you need for these gloves is sport weight. And I looked at her a little bit confused. And she goes, okay, well, let me explain to you. There's all these different weights of yarns. And she went over that with me. And then she said, well, what needles do you have? So I showed her my aluminums. And she said, those are the wrong size needles, too. And I said, there's sizes? So clueless. And so, yeah, she said that, well, those are size 9, I think they were, and what you need is a size 4 for this pattern. But you also have to knit this in the round, so you either need to do it with double points or magic loop. And at the time, magic loop was still fairly new, fairly new technique. It was around, but a lot of people were still doing their stuff in the round on double points, and so Sandra taught me how to do it on double points. We got some bamboo double points. I don't even remember what they were, maybe clover. And so still not like high end. And we picked out some yarn that I could afford, and luckily it was a small project, just being fingerless gloves, so I could, only get by with only one skein. I think, I can't remember what yarn I used, but she walked me through it, and she taught me how to read the pattern, and that's what started my love affair with knitting. From then on, I was hooked. I knit a lot of things, and I ended up finishing those mitts, but the first one I made, and then I made the first one, and I liked it, but then I took a break and knit something else, maybe a couple other things, and then when I went back to knit the second mitt, oh, no, I know what I did. I knit the first one on like the medium size, and it came out too big. So I knit the second one in the small size, which was perfect, and then it took me a long time to knit a third one in the small size. I think I ended up giving the mitts to my mom. She was like, I need something to just keep in my car for emergencies. And I said, you know what, this is perfect. Just take those. But yeah, it was cool. And then I really enjoyed knitting after that, although it wasn't really until I learned how to knit socks, really, that I fully became a knitter with a capital K, where that became what I was known for, and that was what kept me knitting all the time. When I learned how to knit socks, that was, yeah. And at the beginning of knitting socks, I knit the more convoluted and intricate the pattern was, the better. I absolutely loved knitting Cookie A socks. I didn't like wearing them. I didn't like wearing them at all. So I would knit them on commission. And I loved it when people came to me and asked me to knit, these intricate single-stitch cable designed socks that Cookie A is so famous for. And in fact, I had planned at one point to knit all of her patterns. I think I've knit like 25 of her patterns now, and I've knit all but 2 of her knit sock, knit sock innovation. I think that's the book that I've knit almost all of the patterns for, just for different commission customers over the years. And now I really just want stockinette sock. I just really enjoy the knitting of a stockinette sock. It's a process for me. I really just like the process. Okay, I guess that kind of takes us into question number 3. I'm sorry if that one was a little bit long. It says, what is your favorite or proudest make? And I had to think about this, and I couldn't limit it to one. There's 3 things that I have made that I'm especially proud of. One is, I'll do it in chronological order. So the first thing that I made that I'm especially proud of is a hemlock ring blanket, which is a pattern by Jared Flood. And this is not an especially hard pattern. It's some lacy, and it's a circular blanket that you start in the center and go out like that. But what made me proud about it is that I knit it for a speed knitting contest. Back when, Ravelry was still fairly new, but it was taking off, Knitpicks tried to have a community on their site as well. I don't think they're still doing that, although I don't know for sure. But I was involved in the Knitpicks community as well, and they decided to have a speed knitting contest one time, and you didn't know what the pattern was going to be, but they told you how much yarn you had to buy. And so I asked my mom if she would sponsor me, meaning that she would buy the yarn, and then she could have the finished product if I won. Or no, she could have the finished product whether I won or not. But the idea was that I couldn't afford the yarn. We were really, really poor back in these days when our kids were really little, and so yeah, I didn't have money for much of anything. But I wanted to do this, and the prize was amazing. You got your choice of any of their needle kits, just one. And at this point, I was still purchasing, like I had just a few needles. I would have to get the cheapest I could find, and try to find projects that used the needles that I already had. I couldn't really afford to buy any new needles unless it was an emergency, and so I was just, things were tight. So I couldn't afford to buy the yarn. You needed like 7 or 9 skeins of Knitpicks Wool of the Andes worsted, which isn't expensive yarn. I don't know if they still do the worsted line, but it isn't expensive yarn. It's 100% wool. It's not nice yarn, not like luxury yarn. It's fine to work with, but yeah, it's pretty basic. So this was back in 2009, I think February of 2009. So you knew how much yarn you were supposed to get. Mom couldn't pick a color a single color, so she decided her family room at the time was done in like forest green and like cranberry, and so she picked those two colors. She goes, "Do you think it'll work with two colors?" I said, because I had no idea what it was. We knew that it was. I think we knew that it was going to be a home decoration. I do think we know that. So the colors that she picked were forest heather and firecracker heather, and I think it was, they started it one day at like 8 a.m. They released what pattern it was, and the first person to finish it and post a blocking photo won. It had to be blocking. And so I knit like a mad woman. I had to win. Now there were some advantages. One is that it was 2009, so Tatum was home. Tatum was born, but Delaney wasn't yet. I wasn't even pregnant with Delaney yet. So yeah, I was home by myself, and I had a 2-year-old. So she took naps, and she could play by herself a lot, and I just didn't leave the house. And because it was Knit Picks of the Andes wool, which is not superwash, I was able to spit splice all the yarn. So I didn't end up having to weave in very many ends. I think I wove in, the first and the last, and then where I changed the colors. So I knit like crazy. I took very few breaks. I slept very little, and I finished the entire blanket in 54 hours. And I won, which was amazing. I even had to go to my mom's house to block it because I didn't have a place where I could put it down, I think. So I finished it, and I drove over to my mom's house, and I got it. I don't even think I soaked it. I just got it wet, and I laid it out, and I blocked it, and I took a photo, and I posted it, and I won. And the second person posted 9 minutes later, so I barely won. If I had known it had been so close, I wouldn't have, I would have blocked it at home. But yeah, I won, and it was a load of fun, and I was so tired afterwards, and my hands were sore, and you're knitting it on size 10s, so it does go faster than a normal blanket. It's not like it's a blanket out of fingering weight yarn, but still, it was a pretty good accomplishment, and I won a sampler of Knit Picks yarn, and I won a pattern book, any pattern book on their site that I wanted, and then a set of needles. And I got the Harmony interchangeables because they were so pretty. And at the time, I didn't realize that I would want to knit on metal needles instead of wood eventually. But they lasted me for a long time. I still have them, but I don't use them very often anymore. I had started to replace a lot of the needle tips from the Harmony wood to the metal, and then a little bit over a year ago I got my ChiaoGoo set, and have kind of just stuck with that one. But yeah, that was a really good moment in my knitting history, just because I had no money. We were on WIC, and we relied on help from our church and from my mom. My mom bought almost all the diapers at that point, and for a while after that. Tatum was not able to nurse, so we had to buy formula. It was just, it was just a rough financial point in our lives. So it was good to be able to win these high quality needles, and I know that I earned them instead of getting them as a charity, if that makes sense. Another thing that I am proud of is I started dabbling my hand at color work, stranded color work, and so I had started a pair of socks in color work. I don't even remember what pattern it was at this point. This was a long time ago as well, back right around that time, 2009, 2010. And so I'd started these socks, and when I finished the cuff of the sock, which wasn't very high, they were only about that long, I tried to put it on, and as is the problem with so many new color work knitters, especially ones who try socks. I couldn't get it over my heel because the color work was too tight. My floats were too tight, and there just wasn't enough stitches for the needle size that I had used, or rather I used too small of a needle, you know. And so I took it to Knit Night, and I was complaining about how bummed I was that this gorgeous color work that I'd started didn't work. And I think I'd put it on my wrist. I said, it's too bad it wasn't a glove pattern because it fits on my wrist perfectly. And they said, well, why don't you make it a glove pattern? And so I did. So I of course had to completely change the pattern in order to, you know, make it my own pattern. I used the Norwegian star, which is a common theme motif for color work, and felt pretty good. I'd made several fingerless gloves at that point, and so I felt pretty good with coming up with the thumb gusset with color work and just stuff to do on the inside and the outside of the hand, and I was really proud of the finished project. Got lots of kudos at Knit Night, and several people suggested that I write the pattern up for publication. And I did eventually. It took me a long time, though. So yeah, I first started them in July of 2009, but I didn't get the pattern published until September of 2012. And that is my Solace Gloves pattern. It's the first pattern I published, and I've only published 2. But I was proud of it because it was the first one. It is a paid-for pattern, but it's only a couple of dollars, and yeah, I'm just proud of it. At this point, I probably would have made changes to it, like if I were going to release it now, because I made it really short. It stops here. The reason I did that is because I lived in Southern California, and in Southern California, you don't really need very high fingerless gloves because it's never very cold. And I liked having full use of my fingers. Here in Colorado, I could really use, you know. So I've given thoughts to revamping the pattern, and maybe one day, and making it longer so that it covers up more of your hands. Maybe just making it a little bit better. I mean, it's rather old now. And then finally, something that I'm proud of just simply because it was such an undertaking. I was quite a big commission knitter back in 2009 to 2014 or so. I knit a lot on commission, because again, they were lean years for us, and I could not afford in our budget to buy yarn. It wasn't something that we could do. Thankfully, my yarn shop was so awesome because they understood that I had the passion for knitting, but I didn't have the funds to support them. So I would support them in other ways. I would tell everybody that I could think of where they needed to buy the yarn. It would help to talk with customers that came in and try to help sell yarn as people came in. But they would support me by commissioning me to knit things, and then they would pay me in yarn. Some of the owners would do that, and then the shop itself would do it, and then I had other knitters who would request me to make things. And then, yeah, I got paid in yarn, which was great, because then I could have the yarn. I could try out all these great, high-quality yarns without having to, not feed my children. One of the biggest undertaking commission jobs that I had ever done was a Melody shawl. Yeah, a Melody shawl by Mary Young Smith. And when I had taken the commission, I thought that it was just a triangular shawl that was knit like all triangular shawls, just like this. It gets bigger, and then, get to the end, and I knew it was big. You could see in the pictures that it was big. But I figured, I knit a lot and had lots of time. This was 2009 as well, and so yeah, I took on the commission. Well, the Melody Shawl takes over 1,700 yards of I think it's fingering weight. Let me look. Yeah, 1,700 yards of fingering weight yarn, and it's broken up into three pieces. You have, section one, which is stockinette, so that was easy peasy, and then section two, which also continues on with the triangle, which is a fairly simple lace pattern, and so I was like, oh, well, this is great. I just flew through section one and two. Section three is a knitted on border, and it was ridiculous. And you have to remember that by the time that I got to section 3, there were over 500 stitches on my needles. So it was already massive. Section 3 was a knitted on border. So instead of going like this, it all of a sudden went like this around. Does that make sense? And there were 93 repeats of the lace pattern for the knitted on border. But the lace pattern itself was like 35 rows or something like that. So 93 repeats of 35 rows. It was insane. I knit it in 5 weeks, which may seem like really quickly, but it felt like it lasted forever. And it was massive when it was done. I'll post a picture here of me wearing it. And I took it into the shop, and it was at the shop for a long time. A lot of people oohed and awed over it. I felt a lot of pride when I was finished with it, but boy howdy, I will never take a commission like that again. Okay, number 4. What is your most disastrous make? Well, thankfully I only had one of these, and it's a pair of socks that I made for my mom in December of 2009. They were Christmas socks. Apparently 2009 was a big year for me for knitting. They were Christmas socks, and in fact they were called Christmas socks by Anne Abrahamson. Unfortunately, the pattern is no longer available. It wasn't even a pattern. It was just a chart for this color work motif for the band of a sock, the leg of a sock. And I thought, well, I've knit color work before I can do this. So I had some leftovers, not minis, because minis weren't really a thing back then. And I had some solid bits of yarn, and I had some Fortissima, what is it, Scholler and Stahl Fortissima sock, which is a commercial sock yarn. I think it's German, and it was like ice blue and white mixed together. It was kind of pretty. So I thought I could use that for the body of the sock, and it would look, wintry, icy, and then I would do the color work. And I did the socks toe up, which was, my favorite way to do them. And I knit the sock, the first sock, not a problem, the foot of it, and then did the color work, did the entire chart of the color work, and the chart was the entire leg of the sock. I did the entire chart in the fingering weight yarn, and it didn't, on a 2. I think I did the sock on a 1, the chart on a 2, and I couldn't get it on. So I ripped out the chart, went up to a size 3, US 3, and knit the chart again, tried the sock on. I could get it on, but it was all stretched out. And I knew that if I went up to a size 4, it was the stitches were just going to be too loose. The gauge was going to be way too loose. So I toyed with the idea of changing the chart and adding stitches to it, but I don't know that I felt comfortable doing that. And so in the end, I ended up ordering some Knit Picks Knit Picks Merino Style. I don't know if they even have that yarn anymore. And excuse me, and it was a DK weight yarn. And so I did the entire chart on a 5, I believe, in DK weight yarn, and called that sock done. And when I was knitting it, I was like, oh, no, this will be all right. This will be all right. But I did the foot in fingering weight, and it was like a light fingering too, and then the leg in DK, and even though the color work turned out okay, well, and then I came into some more issues with the second sock, because the yarn I had gotten from somebody, it was, you know, it was a charity give yarn, and whoever I'd gotten it from had had problems in the past with moths. So while I was knitting the inside of the ball for the first sock, I didn't have any problems, but when I got closer to the outside, I came into broken yarn, and it was broken in so many different pieces. And I think I only had a 50-gram ball, so it wasn't like I could really just throw that one out and start the next ball. I had to just do my best, and then, you know, so I finally got with 100 million ends to weave in, and then did the color work on the second sock, and then gave them to my mom for Christmas. And yeah, it was pretty sad. Here's a picture of them. They just, it was a bad idea. You can't mix DK and fingering weight, and they weren't the best socks anyway, and they still didn't fit properly. I don't think she ever really wore them. She wore them that Christmas day, and I think that was the end of it. It was, you know, it was live and learn type of a thing. I've knit her a lot better pairs of socks since then. Question number 5. Do you have a favorite place to buy yarn or fiber, online or local? I would say that locally, it's my local yarn shop, Colorful Yarns in Centennial. It's an amazing yarn shop. Tiffany does an amazing job keeping up with the trends. She makes a point to try to get as much indie dyed yarn as possible in the shop, and she has lots of space, and she fills it with beautiful, beautiful yarn. She has plenty of non-indie dye yarn as well, but lots of indies. And it's great. You know, I can go in there and I can buy Hedgehog, I can buy Teeny Button Studio, I can buy Hugh Loco, I can buy, oh, I don't know, 3 Irish Girls, Spun Right Round, Chasing Rabbits, yeah, you know, there's a bunch. That's not even half of the indie dyed yarns that she has, and she's getting in new ones all the time. So it is great to have that just at my fingertips. Online, you know, really, I purchase most of my yarn online from the indie dyers, so I don't have one specific spot where I go and buy yarn. Question number 6 is, what is your most used or most loved pattern? You know, I thought about this a lot. I'm not one that really tends to re-knit patterns a lot. I have done that with some baby knits. Like I've knit Entrechat, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. But really, I guess I would have to say that my most used pattern is my stripy sock recipe, which is a free pattern. It's my second and only other pattern that I've released on Ravelry. And as I said, it's a free pattern. It's called Christie's Stripy Sock Recipe, and it basically is just a recipe for stockinette socks. Question number 7, what is your most dreaded knitting task? You know what, I'd have to say it's picking up stitches for a button band. I don't mind weaving in the ends. I mean, I don't like it, but I don't mind it. I don't hate it. I won't put off it. But I don't like picking up stitches for a button band. If I could have a little gnome that would pick up the stitches for me every time, then I would utilize that gnome all the time. I don't often have to take it out, but but I don't like the pressure of making sure that I've got it right and that I'm picking up the right stitches and I'm picking up the right amount of stitches. I just would rather the stitches be on the needle. Once they're on the needle, then I'm good to go. But I don't like it. I don't like it, even though it's not especially hard. I just don't like it. And then question number 8: what is your favorite task? I guess my favorite kind of thing to knit, because I don't have a favorite, like, oh well, I really love Kitchenering or something like that, but like a finishing thing. But I do really like to knit cables. I love the look of them. My brain seems to work with them. Yeah, I cable without a cable needle, and I just find that cables are something that works in my head. So yeah, and I love, 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 love the way they look. Question number 9: what is your favorite crafty entertainment? I'm assuming this is, what is your favorite, what is it? Well, I mean, is this supposed to be, what is the favorite entertainment that you like to have while you're crafting? Or is it, what entertainment do you like that pertains to crafting? I guess the answer is the same. Podcasts. I love watching podcasts. I love, especially when it's somebody who's really, an accomplished knitter, somebody who really does a lot of things. I love seeing their knitting. I mean, even if it's somebody, even if it's just, like stockinette socks, I really like seeing people's knitting. I like hearing them talk about their knitting and what they're doing and what they're thinking about doing. And so I just really enjoy watching podcasts that show off their knitting. It's just like having a big knit night. So yeah. I don't only watch podcasts when I knit. I do watch all kinds of things. I knit while I'm watching anything. So, but I do, yeah. Podcast and knitting, they go well together. Question number 10: for your patterns, do you prefer books, magazine, Ravelry, or would you rather make up your own? I prefer to get my patterns through Ravelry. I love being able to purchase them and download them straight from Ravelry, have them on my computer, print them out when I need them, and then have them in the Ravelry database for when I need to download them again. I do not like to have a bunch of printed patterns with me. When I finish a pattern, I get rid of it. When I have a printed out pattern, like, pages, I'm a hash marker, so I will keep notes and make my hash marks on the pattern. It's folded up. It's probably got coffee stains or watermarks, and so by the time that I'm done with the pattern, I'm done. By the time I'm done with the project, I'm done with the pattern, and I just get rid of it. I don't like to keep it around. I like the fact that they're electronic and they're hidden in my computer and in the internets. That makes me happy. I do have some pattern books, but when I knit from a pattern book or a magazine, I make a copy because I don't like, I find carrying around books or magazines to be cumbersome. So yeah, but I really like to be able to purchase from Ravelry, download it, have it all online. I always have to print out. This is what's funny. So I like being able to get them all online, but I don't knit for, I don't bring up a pattern on my phone or a tablet or something like that and knit from that. I want to have a hard copy printed out. Yeah, it's like I'm old school and new school mixed together. For question number 11: what is your favorite brand of knitting needles? Well, it used to be Knit Picks. I used to love, love, love Knit Picks, and I still really appreciate their good quality and their good customer service. Their needles are good. I will say that I did run into problems with the harmonies detaching where the wood meets the metal end bit of the needle, and I would, because they're interchangeables, I would spin them on, twist them on, and then the wood would just keep twisting or it would come out, and that was annoying. but you know, Knit Picks has a lifetime guarantee, so you could return them and get new ones. I got tired of having to do that though, and their prices are so reasonable that as we got better off financially, I felt guilty about having to, you know, have them return, you know, replace another set of needles that I had used umpteen hundred times, especially sock needles. When, you know, I'd be magic looping and I'd use this sock needle for 50 pairs of socks, and all of a sudden the needle tip comes off of the cable. I got my money's worth out of the sock needles. They only cost $7, so I definitely made $7 worth of socks out of them. So I felt kind of, I don't know, bad about contacting them for replacements. But then when ChiaoGoo came onto the scene, I was blown away by their cables. While I didn't have too much of a problem with Knit Picks cables staying coiled, I wasn't one who needed to like boil them or hold them over steaming water or anything like that. I was enamored by the fact that ChiaoGoo cables have no memory. They just, you know, they lay flat, no matter how long they've been, you know, coiled up. And they're just as sharp, if not sharper, the tips than Knit Picks, and so I started purchasing those. And ChiaoGoo is slightly more expensive, but it's really still a very reasonable needle. But they last so long. I haven't had to replace a ChiaoGoo needle yet. And you know, I knit a lot of socks, and I've been knitting on ChiaoGoo sock needles for 5 years, maybe? And I've never had to replace one. Not once. And for the longest time, I only had 2, and I would just go back and forth between using them. So those first 2 ChiaoGoo sock needles, which were US ones, 40-inch fixed circulars, those went through a lot of socks. And they still are in commission. I still use them, and so yeah, I'm very, very impressed with the quality and the price point of ChiaoGoos. I have tried Addies, and I never liked them. I don't like the smell, and I don't really care for the tips. Although I know that the Sock Rockets are a little bit better, but they're expensive. They're like $15. And then Signatures I've never tried, but you know, they're even more expensive. And I haven't tried Hayas. I've looked for them, but I want to buy them. Like, I want to see them in person before I buy them, so I don't want to buy them online. And so every time, like when I went to the yarn crawl in August, I checked every yarn shop and nobody carried them. So maybe when I go to the Interweave Yarn Fest, which is in Loveland, Colorado, in April, I will look to see if somebody's carrying Hayas. Because I wouldn't mind trying out their sock needles. I've heard good things. But yeah, ChiaoGoo, those are my bag. Those are my favorite. I have the interchangeable set, and then I have a bunch of fixed US ones for my socks, and I use them almost solely. The only time that I go back to my Knit Picks now is if I need, if I've already got, because my interchangeable ChiaoGoo set only has one size of each needle right now, and if I end up needing to do a second project that uses the same size needles, then I will use my Knit Picks. But yeah, ChiaoGoo. Question number 12. What is your favorite notion or tool? This is the Sock It To Me shoe size to sock length conversion guide, copyright 2012. I picked this up at my yarn shop. Not 2012, 2002, sorry. I picked this up at my yarn shop back when I first started knitting socks. I liked it because it doesn't, I mean, you can go by the measurement, but it also goes off of shoe size for women, for men, and for children. And when I was knitting so many socks on commission, it helped so much to be able to just say, what size shoe do you wear? Oh, I wear a size 8, which happens to be the shoe that I wear. Okay, so your foot is 9 5/8 inches, so I knit the sock to 7 5/8 inches and then start the heel or the toe. And I have knit all of my socks, with the exception of maybe the first couple of pairs that I knit way back in 2008 or 2009, using this. And I really haven't had anybody complain about them not fitting. In fact, I get a lot of compliments on how good they fit. So this is the one thing that I have used so much. I use this a lot. So if you can find this, I don't find it very often anymore. And it bums me out. And I know some other people have tried, have talked about other things. There's that one that fits inside your sock and you can measure it. But this is great because it tells you how long to make the sock. But yeah, I've used it so much. You still have to know how to make socks, of course. This isn't going to tell you how many stitches to cast on or anything like that. But it does tell you how long to make it. And it's perfect for when you only know what size shoe they wear. Question number 13. What is your current favorite project? Well, I don't have a lot of projects on the needle right now, and most of them are just socks. But I just finished my Comfort Fade Cardi by Andrea Mowry yesterday, and it is now laying in front of me blocking. So I'm going to count that because I just finished it. And since I don't have an FO shot of it, it's still considered a whip in Ravelry. So we're going to count it as that. And I will post an FO picture of it when I can. But it is gorgeous, and I'm so pleased with how it turned out. And it was so much fun to knit. Question number 14. Favorite place to knit in public? Everywhere. I knit everywhere. I always have my knitting with me. I carry it just in case, because what if you have 5 minutes that you have to wait? You can knit. What if, well, I come from California, so what if there's an earthquake? I know that there's not earthquakes everywhere, but that was always my thought. What if there's an earthquake and I am stuck inside the store, or inside my car, or inside, wherever? If I have my knitting, I can be good for a long time without panicking. And there's been several times where I have been stuck for, 10-15 minutes and been saved by my knitting. There's been a few times where I have forgotten my knitting and then gotten stuck and just been so aggro because I have nothing to do with my hands. So I have my knitting with me everywhere. And there's lots of times where I will carry it with me throughout the day, and then I won't knit on it until I get home. But at least I had it, and so yeah. Question number 15. What is your favorite Fiber Arts book? I don't know. I don't buy a lot of books, as I said, that have to do with fiber arts. I don't really I prefer to get them online, so I don't buy a lot of pattern books. I guess if I had to pick one, I would say the Stephanie Pearl McPhee storybooks, where she's, just talking about, she's just telling stories about her knitting experiences. I like those. I loved those when I was a new knitter, and I would just gobble them up. She's a very talented writer, and I used to read her blog a lot too, but I got out of the habit of that. But yeah, I guess I'll go with that one. Question number 16. Do you have any other hobbies? I read a lot. I read a lot. Not quite as much as I knit, but mostly because I can multitask when I'm knitting, and I can't. Well, I mean, with audiobooks I can, but it's more. It's not a social. Like, I can knit with everybody and carry a conversation and have grand fun, but I cannot read and carry on a conversation. And I guess that's it. Mainly knitting and reading. Those are my two big things. Question number 17. If you could meet anyone in the fiber arts community, who would it be? You know what? I would really have to say that it would have to be the friends that I've made through the podcasts. When I was watching Erin and Tiffany's version of this fiber arts tag, that's basically what Erin said, and I have to agree with her. I don't really feel the need to meet designers or authors or anything like that. but I've made friends, like real friends, through my podcast and watching other people's podcasts. And so yeah, I'd love to go to Canada and meet Aaron. I'd love to go to Portland and meet Carrie. It's that kind of thing. I'd really just like to. I'd love to have like a knitting retreat that was entirely populated by the podcasters that I really dig and the viewers that watch me, that that I've built relationships with. That's what I would like to have. I think it would just be great to just be with all of these people in real life, in real time, and be able to chat and do a face-to-face thing and knit together. That would be awesome. Okay, so the next 4 questions, the final 4 questions, are rapid fire. Question number 18, knit or crochet? Knit. Question number 19, weave or spin? If I had to do one, it would probably be spin. Question number 20, color or neutrals? I think that everybody would know that I'm very much about color. All the colors, all the time. And question number 21, sweater or socks? Again, I think it's pretty obvious, socks. I am a sock knitter by trade. Though I do love knitting sweaters, socks are my bag. So, all right, guys, I think that is long enough. I'm going to try to edit it down a little bit. But this was fun. If you have a podcast, do it. This is a great tag. You get to talk a little bit about your knitting, and people get to know more about you personally. So, yeah, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys next Wednesday with my next podcast. Bye.